You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What's holding you back from having it all, and how can your subconscious mind help? Stay tuned for today's episode. This episode contains strong language and listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we explore how hypnosis can tap into the brain's potential to help us shift limiting beliefs and align with what we truly want in life. By understanding the connection between the mind and behavior, we uncover how hypnosis can support us in moving past mental blocks and creating lasting change. Saar is a therapist, published author, digital marketer, photographer, deep motivator, master in behavioral neurosciences, and a mom who will nourish your insides with depth, psychology, and her love for life. She is the youngest therapist who has had her own breakthrough TV series, The Hypnotist, psychological published author, the best wedding photographer in 2013 and runner-up in 2014, best home chef in 2011, and an overall high achiever. Ever since she was a little child, she has wanted to be the best in the world in her area, or has chosen something else to passionately follow, and encourages everyone to do the same. She wants to show you that you actually can have everything in life when you know your steps. You just need a map, courage, and patience, and your journey inwards can begin. Let's meet Saar. Hi, Maris. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because you can have everything is such a fascinating topic for our conversation today. And so wonderful that you are here today to speak to us about that. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I've been waiting for this podcast to have a chat with you. So I'm overly excited.
That sounds fantastic. And the topic is going to be amazing, so I very much look forward to it and so glad we connected and you're here today. For starters, would you like to share a little bit about your own story and where you have been and what you have been through to come to today and what it is that you do today so our listeners can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, of course. A bit of a backstory to the story itself is that I'm the all or nothing kind of type. And the thing with me is I see the world maybe a bit differently. I don't have most of the fears people do about others' opinion or so on. I just kind of don't care. I will do my own thing. But at times it kicks in, but mostly it's not there. Just as a backstory to the story itself. And I like to start the story off with a time 13 years ago. It was a beautiful winter's day, and I was at my bedroom. The snow was falling down, and I was just watching outside. My 3-month-old son was sleeping in the next room. And I remember feeling so sad. Despite the little miracle sleeping next door, I was feeling anxious. I felt alone. I felt like nothing in this world could make me feel better or make this whole situation better. And my then husband came home and reflected upon me that, hey, I think you need to see a specialist. There's something going on. I agreed. So I went through every possible therapist I could find from the conventional ways. And one ad popped up to me, and it was about hypnotherapy. So I researched. And the thing with me is I need a solution and I need it now, as quickly as possible. I found a hypnotherapist in Norway. We had an online session. It took about 30 to 45 minutes. And after that 45 minutes, I was a whole different person. And I realized that the story I had been telling myself before that, the 2 feet on the ground kind of girl, I was raised up in a science lab. My dad is a scientist. So really 2 feet on the ground, nothing exists beyond the seeable realm. And having that one session sparked up a curiosity in me that if I, the 2 feet on the ground kind of woman, can have this kind of experience, then there's something in this that needs to be studied. So me, I want it now. I want it as quickly as possible. And the courses in Estonia usually last 3 to 4 years. Well, I don't have that kind of time. I want it quicker. So I found a course in London, and it's only, I think, 3 or 4 hours to fly to London. So I went to London to study hypnotherapy. I came back. It took a year, back and forth, online sessions, and so on and so on. And then I decided that I'm going to be the best hypnotherapist that there is. That's just the way I am, all or nothing. And I quickly realized that that's not going to be so easy. I'm just starting out, but I already feel that this is something for me. And I reached out to magazines, to podcasts, to radio stations, everywhere. And I got a few articles here and there. And then as time went forward, a few months, an agency contacted me and asked me that if I have been thinking about making a TV show. No, I hadn't been thinking about it, but hell yeah, I'll do it. And we did a promo session. It went really well. They took a month to consider it and we started filming it. But before filming it, they asked me that, are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be The Hypnotist. It's called The Hypnotist. It's going to air on prime time in front of 140,000 people. Are you sure? So I thought that the only thing that I can lose is my dignity. I can always get it back. So let's roll. The Hypnotist lasted for 2 seasons. I got thousands of emails after each session, and it was wonderful. And that skyrocketed my career. I published a book. I was on many, many covers. And that was 8 years ago. And it took me 8 years to be on this point where I feel that I'm ready to be in English-speaking media. I'm from Estonia. It's a small country. We barely have 1.2 million people living here. So it's a handful. And everything English-speaking world had seemed so scary and so wide. And the little girl inside of me was afraid for 8 years. Of course, there's a story of multiple failures and about 5 burnouts in 8 years and other crises. But I'm here today and I'm glad to have this chat with you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing your path and your journey with us to here and to now where we meet today. I, for one, am thrilled that you are here today speaking to us in English. So wonderful. And you have really jumped into life with just bravery, courage, going for it. I love your drive and your passion that you want it and you want it now, because often we need that kind of motivation to go forward. It's really easy to put things off and I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it when it gets easier, when I feel better. And especially when we are struggling with mental health challenges or burnout, it can be very difficult to make any kind of decisions at all or move forward in any kind of way. So, wow, amazing what you have accomplished and bringing that gift of hypnotherapy out to a wider audience, your TV show. That is so exciting. And do you still work with clients with hypnotherapy now, or is that something that pivoted for you?
I still work with clients, one-on-one clients. And I also train hypnotherapists, and I train them with to be a hypnotherapist, get a certification, but also to be a therapeutic life coach with neuroscience base. That's the majority of what I do. But one-on-one clients is something that I love doing because the little scientist in me gets to take out all her toolbox, just have a little peek inside of the brain and figure out what's going on.
I love that. And I love how excited you get about that. That is so much passion there. And what do you find when people work on some of their challenges? I mean, there's obviously a broad range of issues that people come to see you with, but what do you see that happens in the brain when you work with people? Maybe let's talk about some of the more mental health challenges like burnout or depression or anxiety. If you work with those, what have you found when you work with the brain in that way with hypnotherapy?
What I see the most is, especially in the Northern European countries, but also Southern European as well. Most of my clients are just Northern European. I do have some from South Europe as well. What I see the most is the constant pattern of thinking with your conscious brain, overthinking, and that leading to the flight or fight state, depression, anxiety, overthinking and overthinking and overthinking. That is just a simplification, but a lot of that background is in there. I also see that people do not know very much about how the brain works or how they themselves work. There is a lack of awareness of the patterns they go through and the lack of healthy habits, or even not knowing what habits to cultivate, to have those healthy habits to, for example, either journal or to have morning or evening routines, or know how to patterns form and how to break them. So I see a lack of those. And what happens when they come to the session is we first work with what they know, what they think, what they know, how they feel. So it's like mapping out the scene of their brain. What behaviors do they have? What are the patterns they have had throughout the year, throughout their childhood, their parents? So it's like a mapping and decompressing of the current state. And then we start the puzzle piecing, which is the most exciting part, because having gone through more than 3,000 brains, and I'm sorry to say brains, but I just love the word. Having gone through more than 3,000 brains individually, I can say that there are certain patterns that the brain uses. So when we decompress the puzzle, we take the pieces apart. I can reflect back to the client what I see, what I think, how those patterns are formed. And I'm having just a movie session right in front of my eyes. I'm just trying to find the words to describe it to you right now. But it's like a movie I'm watching while I talk to the client, while I reflect back. And I do not tell them what to do. They tell me what they want to do. I just reflect back. I hold space. And I tell them the way the brain works, where the trauma may be from, as using their own words. And then we do hypnosis as a way to reprogram the initial memory. What I think that people usually don't talk a lot about when they use hypnosis is that every person is an individual puzzle. And when a trauma occurs, or when an even, how would I say it in a nice way, so it doesn't offend anyone, even the tiniest action in our life early on can have a profound effect, that layers and layers of trauma and misunderstanding can be built upon. So once we find that initial building block and change it, the system cannot work the same way anymore. And that's what hypnosis does. That's why I love it.
Yeah. Wow. And through listening to you explain this, it has become very clear to me why initially just regular therapy didn't work well for you, because it was missing, I think, a lot of those pieces that people generally aren't taught. I mean, we're not taught in school how to recognize our patterns or how to make better habits or routines. And we're not really taught that later when we go into the workforce. So it is not really a surprise to me that so many people are suffering and are challenged with all these various different things, because we're just not taught how to properly regulate, how to even work with our bodies and minds. And we're not taught about the brain. So that to me makes a lot of sense when you mention that. And recognizing those patterns and actually starting the healing process is such an important piece of that. How and why does hypnotherapy actually work? So we go in and we find these core things that you described, these core building blocks. And how does hypnotherapy then address these very core building blocks so that we can remove them or change them or adapt them to what serves us today? How and why does that even work in the brain?
Mm-hmm. So let me take apart the session I do just as building blocks and describe it to you, because I think all the parts are equally as important in addition to the hypnosis itself. I think that you, being you, doing what you do, know that the important part of all of this is holding space for the person to feel safe, to feel that they can trust the person in front of them, that the person can actually understand. Like you understand me right now, I understand you. And this is what the client needs to feel. So I take about 20 minutes to create that trust with the client, that I can actually understand what they feel and reflect that back onto them so they can feel that I get it. I get their feeling. I get exactly how much of a either burden or emotion or turmoil or how just a ripple it is for them, however the experience is for them. After creating that safe space, we decompose the puzzle, we find the puzzle pieces, we agree upon the general theme. I want to know what the person has tried before. I want to know how they relax, how much thoughts they have in their head, if they have any fears, if they have any triggers. I need to know that beforehand. If I have all of that information, I need to get the person to be relaxed enough to actually go back to the root cause. So consciously, usually we don't know what the root cause is. We can think that I think it is connected to A, B, or C, but we actually don't know. But the subconscious mind that holds the memories unconsciously, it knows. It knows very well. We control it, but we also can, if we relax enough, if we feel safe, and if the therapist guides us enough, we can actually get in contact with those memories. And then the process starts. We need to either use different variables of the therapy are available. We can use self-parenting techniques. We can change the memory. We can change the feeling. We can use gratitude. We can hold that special memory and put it away in a special place. There's so many different solutions to when we find that root cause. And what kind of technique to use, that is usually up to the client. The clients, we can say it's their unconscious mind. I would like to refer and make a differentiation between their higher self and their unconscious mind, because to me, they're not the same. The unconscious mind or subconscious mind holds the memories and holds the patterns of this life, this current life, even when the baby was in the womb. So those memories are stored in the brain. But the higher self, it's energy, it's guiding us through life. So with the higher self being in guidance and the subconscious mind, together, they usually will come up with a solution while I talk to the client. And then we may do some healing, we may do some trauma release and come out of the session and debrief. That is how I usually work. And I have totally forgotten your question. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered it.
That was perfect. I was just wondering why and how hypnosis works, and that was perfect. Breaking down the steps and letting our listeners have a glance at what a session would look like. I get the feeling very often that people are still quite skeptical about hypnosis. They don't really know what happens when we start poking around in our subconscious, and that can bring up some fear and also some disbelief that something so simple in its technique could have such profound impacts on our entire lives. So I love how you just broke that down, and coming from this very scientific perspective also in your life to explain that and what a session like that would look like. And I think, as you have experienced yourself, the effects of hypnosis and of sessions like that, when we actually can transform these traumas and challenges that we have, are absolutely profound, and they can ripple through every piece of our lives. So we've touched a little bit on the mental health part of it and working with burnout, anxiety, depression. But I mean, there are so many things. And I'm sure after having looked at 3,000 brains, you've probably found a whole range of things that people come to you with that we can work with in hypnosis. What are some of the things that you see coming up sort of over and over again?
I think the most common one is anxiety, depression, shame. I think shame may be the most common in all shapes and sizes. Shame about being yourself, shame about what others think of you. It's an internal feeling, the shame. Shame about the things you have done and the things you haven't done. I think it's a traumatizing feeling, energy that we carry inside of us. And that's a big part. It just came to me as, I haven't thought about that, but there's a lot of shame. There's also a lot of burnout and people not understanding why they are in burnout cycle number, 1 to 10 again. I love burnout cycles. I'm in cycle number 5 coming out. It's my habit, the burnout cycles. Everyone has a hobby, right? But in being in burnout cycle number 5 and coming out of it alive and well and smiling has put me in this path of neuroscience. But yeah, anxiety, depression, shame, and then there's all kinds of various issues from not being confident enough or not listening to your intuition. Sometimes it's a small tweak, but self-trust issues is, I think, one of the most common roots of all the problems that are there. And those arise from childhood experiences mostly.
Yeah. Whenever I work with hypnosis and hypnotherapy, there is a majority of things that seem to go back to childhood at some point that have this ripple effect into our adulthood and shape how we still kind of listen to the guidance of those 5, 6, 7-year-olds that we used to be. But that no longer actually helps us now that we're adults. And it takes some work on that part to change those patterns and to actually step into a different perspective and a different way of looking at things. So yeah, hypnosis is so helpful for that.
Well, can you imagine your 6-year-old self driving your relationships, for example, or your 3-year-old self guiding your monetary expenses? It would be a disaster, but usually it's true.
Yeah, that's what happens, right? And that's why we end up in burnout or in anxiety or depression, because these patterns simply just don't work for the age we are now. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense to look in those pieces of ourselves to discover that. And I love the idea, and this has been a really big part of me with hypnotherapy, is the empowerment that happens through working with what we maybe once thought would keep us prisoners sort of forever and was just the way we had to live, to actually come into this freedom of recognizing that we have the power to change a lot of those things going on in our lives.
Exactly. I am more than happy that you said that because, and again, it's the way the brain works. The amygdala, fear center, its pathways are 12 times larger and faster. So fear is 12 times more prominent than the positive feelings. And whenever we feel fear and the amygdala lights up its pathways, critical thinking, for example, gets turned off. So whenever all of those old habitual feelings come up, we can't think critically anymore. And I think it's such a powerful thing to sit with yourself, to understand that we can change everything, but just 1% at a time, please. Just one thing at a time.
Yeah. Otherwise, we shut ourselves down a little bit more, even with an overwhelm. So, yeah, good advice. Take this one step at a time. I'm curious, have you come across anything where hypnosis didn't respond very well or didn't work very well? Or have you had sort of success and healing with this across many, many different things?
I've had a few cases in my past where hypnosis was not possible for the client because either I and the client wasn't resonating on the same level. The client did not actually want to change. They loved being either the victim or loved the mindset so much that they were unable to view a different point of view it wasn't just imaginable for them. And I remember one case with Asperger's diagnosed. My son has autism, he is diagnosed. And I know the healing process and therapies that are needed for an autist with Asperger's to go through. And this particular young man hadn't gone through any therapies. He had just gotten a diagnosis at age, I think it was 28. And it was very hard for him. Well, it's Asperger's. You just can't have a different point of view. Your brain works this way. And I remember that I was unable to help him because he had no knowledge of how his brain works. I had 1 second of success with him when I showed him a different point of view. It confused him, it made him open, and he was able to see a glimpse of something else, but that was it. Hypnosis isn't good for anyone who's had a diagnosis that is a psychiatric diagnosis, for example, a personality disorder or schizophrenia. In those cases, hypnosis is not advised because we don't know how the person is going to react. And we cannot be responsible of guiding the person through trance. Or if the person has been through trauma, then we do not poke that trauma too much, just slightly try to understand it. So there's a level of considering that needs to be done. We cannot take everyone back to childhood. There's no need. Mostly, I would love to say that I have been either lucky or successful or whatever it is to be of help and be of service to my clients. I don't think it's me. I think it's cooperation, us working together, them wanting change and me having the tools.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. It's this collaboration.
Yeah.
For someone to come to a point where they actually feel ready to take on some of those things.
Yes.
And that's a really important part of working on some of those challenges that we have, to actually understand that there is a bit of personal accountability in all of that. And we have to come to a point where we're ready to step into that. So, yeah, very interesting that you mentioned that. And of course, if you have the tools and that connects with someone who wants those tools and needs those tools, match made in heaven. So hypnosis works really, really well. Yeah, that is amazing. And we titled the episode sort of a little bit cheekily, You Can Have Everything. But I do think hypnosis actually fits that really, really well, because we can work on so many different things with hypnosis, not just any mental challenges we might be experiencing like depression or anxiety, but we can work on our money blocks, on limiting beliefs. We can work on physical issues. I worked on my chronic pain with hypnosis for a long time. And so there are many different applications that really do let us bake our cake and have it too at the same time. So what other things do you work on with hypnosis when we kind of step outside the anxiety and depression and burnout? What comes up for you in some of those other fields of life that you work on?
Almost everything. I view the human being as beautiful onion. So once we start peeling back the layers, hypnosis is just a tool to access the deeper layers and deeper and deeper and deeper. So when I look at some of my high achieving clients who are entrepreneurs, then we use hypnosis and therapeutic life coaching for all kinds of reasons, for them to address why they feel a certain way, for them to be ready to take the next step, for them to understand where this feeling is coming from, for them to shift the energy or focus from one point to the other, for them to clarify their life vision. Hypnosis is just a tool that pushes away the conscious, negative, strategical, analytical thinking for our intuition to shine through. And if there's something in the way, we can just either shift it or change it. That's what we do with hypnosis. It's just a tool. And I'm so glad to say that it's backed by science. I didn't touch on that very much, but there's a whole explanation we can go on about that. But I'll just come back here right now.
Yeah. And that is kind of the thing that I run into often. Is this scientifically proven? Do we have any studies or anything to back this up? And like you said, there's been work done on that to study hypnosis and the effects, of course, on the brain and all those things.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that we are at a point in history where we can study some of these things and we can actually point to those scientific benefits, which is very, very fascinating. And before we maybe talk about some of that science, I'm wondering, you mentioned the therapeutic life coaching as well. How does hypnosis work together with life coaching? Because, I mean, they are different in the sense that life coaching doesn't put people in sort of a relaxed or trance state, but do they complement each other when you work with both of those modalities with a client?
Mm-hmm. I have to take you back to the beginning. While I was studying in London, I was the nosy Eastern European questioning everything, where stuff comes from. Why do we do it this way? How can it be done? What are the other options? I was curious about everything. And when I learned the process, I just got handed the beautiful tool of hypnosis. But what wasn't handed was the why and the how, the puzzle behind it. So I kind of had to invent the puzzle, the process of untangling or taking apart the puzzle. And that's what therapeutic life coaching is to me. The art of holding space, asking relevant questions for the person to relax, to actually pinpoint the topic that we need to address before. Because we can do a general hypnosis, but that's not a custom-made suit for you. That's just the text someone will tell you. If it's a cooperation, you give out energy, I give out energy, we vibe, we're in the same wavelength. Our brain waves even synchronize. I understand you completely. And then I can use your words, your experiences, and your triggers to build up the hypnosis. But if I don't know your backstory, if I don't know the things you struggle with, then I cannot make any post-hypnotic suggestions as well. So it's not a custom session for you if there's no therapeutic life coaching before. It's just a bulk session. I cannot work with that. It needs to be personal. It needs to be from both sides.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot more powerful too when it's in the client's own words, right? Because that is their brain expressed.
Yes.
Whatever it is that the challenge is in exactly those symbols or words that come up.
Exactly.
Yeah, wow. That is so powerful. And you want to share maybe just a little condensed version of some of the science that you've come across, and just when it comes to hypnosis, and maybe our listeners are a little bit curious on how this is all backed up by science now. And this is probably right along your wheelhouse too of science and all of that.
Yes. So I think the easiest way to go about it is to tell you that hypnosis is a state where you're in a double wavelength situation. So there's theta to get your body relaxed, and there's alpha to get you thinking. You're not unconscious. While in a hypnosis session, you're conscious, you can move, you can answer to me. But being in that state makes your body think that you are falling asleep. And also, when you're doing active hypnosis with me, means that you're imagining you're coming with me on the road. This isn't something that you do while you are dreaming. So it's a unique state. Usually you go through this state twice a day, once when you fall asleep and once when you wake up. When you wake up, it's usually shorter. When you fall asleep, it's longer. It's this either people have experienced it as a weightlessness feeling or feeling of floating or falling down or something like that. That's a hypnotic feeling. It's a completely normal process. You go through it twice a day, at least. So it's a brain wavelength. And because of this uniqueness that your body knows that you're about to fall asleep, but you're not falling asleep, it creates this window, this openness, because your brain does not have a habitual thing to do at that state. So it is alert and open to put in new pathways. I think this is the shortest version I can give you right now.
That makes a lot of sense. And very interesting that we're talking about the brainwaves here, because obviously, and I have fallen asleep during hypnosis before, so kind of goes off the other end there, but it gives us a very unique, like you said, a unique time during the day where we have an actual space where the brain isn't starting to process everything that's going on, but it's actually open to receiving some new input and processing that. So I think those are the times where we can also probably affect the biggest changes in our lives, because we're not being filtered in those moments. We're not holding back or processing other things. We really are just there, open and waiting. So it is a very unique state. And I quite enjoy being in that state because it feels, on one hand, also very productive when we come back out of that state and things actually do change. So
it's because of the habit that once you wake up, you start working, right? You start moving towards something. So coming out of a hypnosis session, it's kind of the same. But I feel like you have some awesome experience.
I love hypnosis. It's one of the very early things that I found on my own journey. Like yourself, I was experiencing a lot of mental health challenges. And this goes back a long time to when I was younger. And hypnosis was one of the only things for me as well that worked. And I didn't know why in the beginning or how. So I became very curious. I studied hypnosis as well and certified in it because I found it to be such a fascinating tool that got into places where talk therapy or medication just couldn't get to it, couldn't get to those pieces somehow. So yeah, my experiences with hypnosis are quite profound, and not just for anxiety and depression, but also for chronic pain. Like I said, I've worked on that with hypnosis, and the changes have been, I also want to say, surprisingly quick. Usually when the brain kind of finds that piece, that core piece that you were talking about, it changes so fast.
Yeah.
And I spend decades in therapy. So a really long time talking about things and nothing shifted. And one hypnosis session made a huge difference. And so I've come to appreciate our own ability, our brain's ability to really shift things so quickly when we find that thread or that piece that really fits. And we don't need to talk about it for 10 years or try and figure things out. One hypnosis session can pull that knot apart so quickly.
Yeah.
And that has been what I'm in awe with, is our own brain and, our ability to do that we're just meant for that kind of healing. So yeah, you're quite right. I've had very great experience with hypnosis, and sometimes it takes longer, but there have been those times where it has been just absolutely amazing to step back from a session and go, wow, I've just had this progress that I haven't had in many years, and something just fell into place and started healing. So, wow.
Have you had this kind of experience where you start untangling one particular topic and you find it throughout the session that it goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and sometimes you feel like, is it ever gonna end? Am I ever gonna get a solution? And then you get a solution, and then you find another thread.
It's like that onion that you were talking about. You just never know what will happen. And the interesting thing is that I never worked before hypnosis actually with past lives. It wasn't really anything even on my radar. But through hypnosis, I started becoming aware that sometimes our triggers may have been in past generations and actually been also passed down to our lives or through family generations, which was a very interesting discovery. And that goes a lot more on the woo-woo side. I find that kind of insight and exploration just very fascinating.
For those who can accept that some patterns have been passed down by generations. For example, my great-grandmother did things the such a way she taught the grandmother, and so on and so on and so on, until up to me. It's actually just a habit of the child observing the parent and then learning from the parent, but making their own unconscious decisions upon it. And it comes from generations, and we can view it from this scientific point of view as well, developmental psychology, but we can heal it with hypnosis. And when we watch the spiritual or energetical side of it, for those who believe and want to know more about it, I think it's fascinating what happens when in hypnosis sessions we work with energy. So working with memories is just one side, but working with that energy and the energetic field. Oh, I love that. I've never seen things in clients' lives move so fast than we're working with energy.
Yeah.
In addition to the beliefs and the memories as well.
Yeah. I think the time works differently when we start working on the quantum level, right? It's different than what we usually would expect to say, okay, now I do therapy. It takes me a year or two to work all this out. But when we work on that kind of energetic level, it can move so much quicker and it doesn't need all this time to resolve, which is very interesting. So, yeah. And I feel we're at a time in this world now where a lot of these things are actually coming into science. I mean, we have epigenetics and we
exactly
have this quantum theory, although not proven yet, but exploring all of that. And this is an exciting time where a lot of these things that we're experiencing, we can actually study now scientifically. I find this a really, really interesting point in time that we live in at the moment.
I love to think what my children or the generation of my children and grandchildren can learn and come up with. That's so fascinating.
Yeah. And we continue from there. We don't know what's around the next corner, but I think hypnotherapy opens up a door to explore all of that in more depth and for people to have these just really amazing healing experiences that do change us on some level, that bring a transformation that changes us in a way. So, yeah, thank you for exploring that with me today. It has been fantastic conversation. And do you want to maybe share a little bit with our listeners how they could work with you if they found this episode inspiring and they're very curious now? How can they work with you? Do you offer any programs or services? You said you love one-on-one sessions. Anything else that you offer?
Yeah, I actually have a hypnosis and therapeutic life coaching course coming up in the end of January. So that's going to be available on the website. And you can view the program, you can sign up, you can have a 30-minute conversation with me if it's a fit for you. So you could use hypnosis for your own life as well, or therapeutic life coaching, or whatever you need it for. If you feel a calling, then I know we're match. And I do work with one-on-one clients as well. And sometimes I find that we don't even need to work together. We can just email, just exchange a couple of emails, and it all starts flowing already. I don't know if you have had that experience, but the energy speaks. So sometimes that helps as well. And I love to send, even if people don't want to learn hypnotherapy or don't want or can't financially work with me, I love to send bi-monthly love letters to my clients as a newsletter. It's nothing about offering the programs there in the end, you can join, but it's a love letter that comes straight from my heart. I energetically weave it. I put bits and bobs of science inside of it and just offer them as little love letters. So I would love for the listeners of this episode, if they connect with me, if they want to learn more about themselves, about the patterns, about the brain, behavior and neuroscience is my chocolate chip cookie that I want to bite into every day. I will delve into topics from healing my own child who was full on autistic, nonverbal, hitting and yelling, to a completely normal 13-year-old still with a diagnosis, but goes to a usual school, goes in trainings, is the most chatty boy I have ever known. And he's kind of a small therapist. So bits and pieces of that as well. And I would just love to spread love in the world. And I feel like you creating this, I'm going to cry now, you creating this podcast and having me on it, I feel like my wings are loose now. And I would love to share this joy with people.
Absolutely. So beautifully said. Thank you for that. And absolutely, that is my hope as well, to get this out to all the listeners who need to hear this, who need to hear your message, feel your energy and connect with that. And we're each and every one of us on a slightly different path, but yet we can connect in these moments where we feel like things just align or we vibe together or however you want to call that, where we find that person that we feel we can share a bit of that path together with. And
exactly.
Thank you for bringing that today and sharing that with our listeners. And of course, we will be linking to all of your offerings in our show notes as well. So I will just encourage our listeners here to take a look at the show notes so they can find all your links in there and they can connect with you on the socials online, with your courses, with your love letter that you send out. That sounds so beautiful. So I definitely encourage our listeners to connect with that. And I would love to hear if you connect with Maris, let us know. Find us on the socials, send me a message, because I say this so many times, but I feel like a lot of magic happens when our podcast guests connect with our listeners. And there are always so many amazing things that come about from these relationships and these connections. So I deeply, deeply encourage you to do that and connect with Maris and also with us on the podcast. Let us know. Unfortunately, this is the time where I thank you for being here. I feel like there's so much more that we could talk about in this episode, so much more that we can dive into. But thank you, Maris, from the bottom of my heart for being here today, sharing your story, sharing all this wisdom that you've gathered, not just about hypnotherapy, but about all these different healing pieces that come together in your modalities. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing that with our listeners and with myself today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for holding this space with so much love and making me as a guest feel loved and held. I'm very grateful for that.
No, thank you so much for that. And absolutely, I hope that we have done your vast experience and wisdom justice today in holding this space. And almost I feel like we're birthing this episode together. So thank you for that, Maris. And thanks for being here today, and take really good care of yourself. And I hope we get to do this again.
We will, for sure.
Amazing. Sounds fantastic. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.